when people talk to me about their information diet, I always say something like, you should probably consume a lot less news and read a lot more books.
Yeah.
Right. Because, and I think that goes to your point about doom, because journalism and news by definition is what's happening now or happened recently. So it's almost never about the way out or never about the solution, because it's about the problem by definition. Right. Whereas a book is a bad medium to talk about what's happening in the moment, because it takes so long to produce, and you expect someone to consume it at a later date. And so in reading history, you can often learn the way out in analog situations that then helps you understand the news. So I'm not saying don't watch the news, don't consume any of it, but if you haven't rooted yourself in history, you're gonna feel like, or philosophy or whatever, you're gonna feel like this is unprecedented.
Yes.
It's never happened before. It's incredibly dangerous, and there's no way out. And it could be a version of all those things, but there's probably been very similar things to this before, and that can help see it in perspective.
Yeah, and I think there's a tendency to kind of overdose on despair, and from the attentional standpoint, like, negative, this sort of, if it bleeds, it leads. The same thing we say in newsrooms: we don't cover the planes that land, right? Like, human flight is like one of the most incredible marvels ever created, and they just go up and then they come down, and it happens like millions of times, and wow, but the other part of it for me in balancing that, which again, the book was really good for, is even in the darkest moments, there's something to learn. Like, I've been, even if you go back and you read sort of run up to Nazi Germany, World War II, the darkest stuff, which sometimes really will freak you out.
Yeah,
with some of the,
history doesn't always make you feel better. I said it puts it in perspective, but it doesn't, like, it also gives you a sense of how fucking bad it can get.
Yes, exactly. But even just like, there's that great, the Anne Frank line where she says, I think people really are good, this very, very sort of wistful and touching sentiment from someone about to be, murdered. There's a Sartre quote that I keep coming back to where he says, we were never more free than under German occupation. And what he means by it, and then he says basically, because even to read the truth, to say the truth, to be true to yourself in every moment was an act of liberation. Because the forces against us were so profound that we truly had to choose to be liberated in every moment we did, in everything we sing, that when your whole life is being controlled and you can't say what you think, you can't read what you want, that you had to choose a kind of liberation or every moment. I think about that quote all the time. How profound it is.
Yeah, I mean, there's this interesting dichotomy in Stoicism, because like you have Marcus Aurelius on the one hand, then you have Seneca on the other, and then you have Epictetus. So you have this kind of spectrum of like absolute power, then you have sort of fame and wealth, and then you have literal slavery. And it's interesting when you read their writings, you kind of get the sense that Epictetus was the freest of them because he was the most self-contained, and because everything had been taken from him, he sort of had this sense of like what truly did constitute freedom, that it wasn't, hey, I can send an army over here or there, or hey, I can buy whatever I want. It's like, I know who I am. I know what this moment represents. I know what I'm not going to allow them to take from me. And yeah, there is something profound about what sort of actual freedom is, and not this sort of license that we often mistake it for being.
Yes. And I find that kind of mode of thinking for me, almost at a therapeutic level, when things are bad, is a real comfort.
Yeah.
Like just almost like emotionally, therapeutically, it's like self-soothing almost, to just emanate out a little bit and look back and try to get a little bit of that philosophical distance. If I'm really in that kind of deep somatic place, fight or flight, anxiety, doom, that is really the thing for me as a both emotional, intellectually, almost spiritual project, is the thing that kind of that gives me succor.
Yeah, I've quoted this before, but there's a letter that Churchill writes to his editor or something, right? As sort of before he comes back to power, but as the sort of all his predictions about Germany are coming true. And he's working on this book. I think it's a history of the English speaking peoples or something.
Mm-hmm.
And he says, I'm putting 1,000 years between me and the present moment for a little bit. And I think there's something about the what's happening now that can feel very overwhelming and hopeless and confusing. And you go, hey, I'm going to study human beings in similar situations. And you go, okay, it can get really fucking bad. So I'm not going to be blasé about this, but at the same time, I'm going to see what actually when all the sort of the R and the D next to people's name gets stripped away, when you even being familiar with the people falls away, you're just sort of left. It cancels out all the extraneous variables, and you kind of see what philosophically and morally what matters on a more profound level.
Yeah.
And then you bring that back to how you're going to act in the present. It's not like, oh, I'm going to escape into my books and pretend this isn't happening, but it's I'm going to understand what's really happening by familiarizing myself with things that have already happened.
Yeah, I found that a really important through line recently.